Hi, welcome everyone. This is our last in the series of Let's Get Ready Together. We're summarizing the series of what we've talked about so far, and we're going to look at how to register for the statewide community college job fair that we're having in Illinois. So without further ado, let's get started talking about what we have covered so far. So one of the first things that we talked about was career coach, which, you know, I'm almost obnoxious, and maybe some people will say I am obnoxious about this. I love this program. This is the homepage, if you haven't visited it yet. And if you look across the top banner, it shows you that there's an assessment, careers, the programs that are available at your school. This is where you can build your resume. And if you know what jobs you're interested in, you actually can link to live job openings right here from this program. So we learned that if we take the assessment, they have a short 6-question one. There's a 30 and a 60. I recommend that the more information you give it, the more accurate it can be. But what it does is analyze your strengths, your personality choices, things that you like, and then matches careers to those to your strengths and the things and your preferences. So instead of, like right now, if I browsed careers, which I'm going to click on right here, and okay, that isn't what I wanted to do. I forgot I'm not live. Okay. If I would browse on all careers, what would happen is they would come up alphabetically. So it would start with agriculture. When you take the assessment and you browse careers, it puts it in order of matches to how you answered the questions in the assessment. So if you're somebody like me who's not so thrilled about working outside, none of those agriculture, gardening, any of those kinds of careers would be suggested for me. So that's what happens when you take the assessment. It matches the careers to you. Through the careers, you can find alternate different types of pathways, if you will, or choices of jobs, and it gives the details about the jobs. It not only gives the details about the jobs, it also tells you what programs at Waubonsie we have that can prepare you for those jobs. The nice part about this program as well is the resume builder, which I think is a fantastic tool to have. The resume builder starts out, you have to set up a profile if you want to save your results in Career Coach. It populates the field of your resume. So when you start your resume, it's already in there. So a fantastic, fantastic job exploration tool that we have available to us. So any questions about Career Coach right now? Okay,
No.
The next thing we talked about was the difference between soft skills and hard skills, because once the first thing we are doing in Career Coach is we're trying to identify what is that career we want to pursue. How are we going to get there? What's it going to take to do that? But we also have to identify what are the skills that we have that match those careers. So we talked about there's soft skills and hard skills. Hard skills are the types of skills that you can take classes for or read about and you can learn. Soft skills are more how you relate to other people, what your communication skills are like, how you manage your time. Are you somebody that likes to work in a team? Are you somebody who likes to work alone? That's the kind of those are those soft skills. Okay, so where do you put these? These are the types of what we talked about in our resumes is we want to match our resume skills to the skills that are required for the job that you're applying for. So in other words, if the job that you're applying for requires computer technology, you want to make sure that you are somewhere either in, if it's not in a previous job that you've had, then you want to have technical skills or just your skills in general, but make sure you highlight the technology skills that you have. If it's more a job, say, where you're going to be working with people, more than likely you're going to be seeing that communication and teamwork, and that's what you're going to want to be highlighting. We're looking for key words in the job description to help us to know what we should be putting in our resumes. And then you can look at, I will send you guys the PowerPoint for this so that you can review which section is which and how you put these in there. Okay, the other thing that we talked about, and I don't think we spent much time on this, when you are describing the jobs that you've had before or the skills that you have, you want to make sure that you're using action verbs when you're describing what you do. So this is called a resume cheat sheet because they're showing us what kind of phrases. And if you look at every one of these phrases, almost every one, the interpersonal skills has more descriptive with the sensitive and supportive, but almost every one of them starts with an action verb. So writes, speaks, listens, okay? Those are all the types of phrases that you want to use action verbs like that to start the phrases that you're going to use to describe yourself. The other thing that I like about this is to be able to say writes clearly and concisely. That's an awesome phrase and very few words, because remember, we don't want to overwhelm our resume. We want to make sure there's still a lot of white space, so it's not just one big black page, okay? Because we want things to stand out. So these are fantastic phrases that you can use when you're preparing your own resumes. The next one we talked about was dressing for success. So this is at the point where you are going to go in for an interview. And we have talked about, particularly in this time during the pandemic, so many things have moved online. Very often, the first interview is a phone interview. Second interview may be a virtual interview, Zoom, Teams, something like that. Very few places will hire you just from Zoom. So hopefully, eventually, you are going to get an in-person interview. And they really stress that how you dress sends a message about who you are. So there's a couple of times that we make first impressions. Our very, very first impression is going to be that resume. Our second impression, if they call us for that screening first phone interview, is how do you present yourself over the phone? And remember, they're not going to just call you and expect you to be ready to talk at that moment. They're going to set up an interview time. And I suggest that if they set up an interview time, you find a quiet spot, you prepare as if it was going to be Zoom and they were going to see you. And on the phone, speak as if they could see you, and present yourself very, very professionally, because that's one of the second time you're going to get to make an impression. Okay. The third time is on either Zoom or in person. In Zoom, we want to dress for success, or in person, we want to dress for success. So, and I don't know about you, but I find that if I when I do Zoom meetings, I try to not be too casual so that I'm kind of in my work mode as opposed to my just around the house mode. So I really recommend that you look at, you don't have to wear a suit. Men don't have to wear a tie unless that's required for the job that you're applying for. But you want to dress more formally. If you're going to make a mistake, be more dressed up than less dressed up. So any questions about the dress? Okay, here's the thing that I don't think we talked about before, so I want to spend a little bit of time on this. This is where on your resume under summary, you can use this. You can also use this, they call it a branding statement, where the brand is you and it's how are you presenting yourself. So you've generally got 30 to 60 seconds to present yourself as professionally as possible. And this is what they want you to answer in that 30 to 60 questions. So you want to say who you are, so that's your name, and what your area of focus is, what your experiences are, what you think your strengths are. Okay, that's what you're trying to answer in those 30 to 60 questions. And one of the things that you want to always keep in mind, the importance of this 30 to 60 second elevator pitch branding statement is you never know when you're going to run into someone who may either know of a job or know someone who is looking to hire someone. So you want to make sure that you give them as much information as you can about yourself so that you show that you're a good match for that job. So if you look at this one, hi, my name is Ryan Johnson, and I'm a soon-to-be graduate of the GED program here at Waubonsee. I'm currently working as a warehouse assistant, and I'm successful in problem solving and communicating with supervisors and peers. I am interested in your organization, and with your organization, you can tweak that. But if you're memorizing it, to say to someone, I'm interested in your company or your organization is okay. You don't have to keep changing this because that could trip you up if you're memorizing this. So you're interested in their organization because you make meeting the needs of your customers a priority. So what you're saying, and then if you look at this, you could do your summary at the top of your resume as soon to be graduate of the GED program at Waubonsee Community College, working as a warehouse assistant, successful in problem solving and communicating. So you're going to take out the conversational part when you're putting it in your resume, but you're going to use exactly those same phrases when you're telling somebody about it. You always want to be ready to be selling yourself. Okay, so here's a template for you. All you have to do is fill in, if you're comfortable with this, all you have to do is fill in the blank spaces and you have your branding statement. Any questions about that? Because I don't think we've mentioned branding statements before. Okay. All right, this is, I thought this was a cute graphic to use because of all the things that we talked about. You have to prepare. And the more prepared you are, the more relaxed you're going to be when you finally get to make a connection, whether it's on the phone, however it is that you first make that connection with them. The more you know about the company, the more you've thought about yourself and your strengths. Those are all things that you want to be ready for. So Okay, so the first one, review the posting in great detail, research the job opportunities. So remember, we talked about in the job posting, they're going to tell exactly what the description of the job is, and they're going to detail the tasks. You want to make sure that interview questions tend to be based on all of those tasks or details. So if it said something like uses Microsoft Office Suite, so one of the questions might be, tell me about what your experience is with Microsoft Office Suite. That's the kind of way that they match the description of the job to you when they're talking to you. If there's a question about communicating with your peers, if that's one of the details, they can ask you either tell us about a time where you had a difficult situation communicating with your peers, or tell us about a time where you were successful communicating with your peers. So think about each of the job details and think of examples in your own experience that you can give for yourself. Researching the company, just going across the top there, remember that you want to know just as much as they want to know if you're a good fit for them, you want to know if they're a good fit for you. So you want to research the company, you want to know how they do things, and you definitely want to ask questions. When you get to the end of the interview, they're going to say, do you have any questions? And asking questions about the company is always, or something that you read either on their homepage or in an ad. They know that you've done research and then that you've put effort into preparing for your interview. So you want to make sure that you research as much about the company as you can. Okay, the preparing the answers for typical interview questions. Last time we talked about those, and I did not include those in the with the PowerPoint. So I will send out that sheet that had some of the typical questions that are asked. The tell me about yourself is always one. You can use that elevator pitch for that. Remember that when they say tell me about yourself, they don't mean anything personal. They're talking about work related. There's usually questions about, tell me about a time where you had to supervise another employee. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake doing a job that you were assigned. Tell me about a time when you had to be interrupted and taken off the job that you were doing. It's that kind of, those are the kinds of questions that they ask. Most of them will revolve around the tasks for the job. One of the things that you can do, today you can Google everything. So if you're going to have a phone interview, Google typical phone interview questions. If you're going to have a face-to-face interview, and that would be the same even for Zoom, but you Google typical Zoom interview questions or face-to-face interview questions, and they'll give you a list. And in the PowerPoint from, I don't know if it was the last time or the time before, we had more of the typical questions and how to answer them. What you want to do going on is, remember we talked about how they refer to it here as red flags. We described it as, think about those things in your resume that may have them ask questions. Like if you've had a period of time where you had no work history, some kind of break in employment, or that's usually the things that they ask about. So the gaps in your employment. or one of the things could be if you have not completed your GED, though that's not a red flag, it's something they could ask you about where you are in that process. So just look at your resume kind of as, or ask someone else to look at your resume and say, what questions would you ask me if you were going to be hiring me? Any questions about that?
No.
Okay, so, and this next one in the middle there, talking about memorizing examples that demonstrate the key behaviors, that's what we were talking about with the job details. So not only are you going to memorize them, but I would also practice saying them. It's good to write them down. I don't know if you guys have heard this before, but a good way to help you remember something is to write it down. It helps to reinforce your memory. So either write it down, type it out, but practice saying it as well. And don't just, okay, I can think of some key behaviors and then just kind of brainstorm and say, okay, I've got it, and not think about how you're going to say it, because if they ask you in the interview, it's going to be hard on the spur of the moment to put a sentence together. So that's why you want to make sure that you write out how you're going to answer it. You always want to, one of the questions that they most likely will end with, as opposed to begin with, is, why do you think we should hire you for this job? And you've got to really be ready for that one, because if you're not convinced that you're the right person for the job, then why should they be convinced that you're the right person for the job? So you want to think about your strengths and how they match what they're looking for, and any work history that you have that matches that particular job. We talked about preparing questions. You want to make sure, a great one to ask is, what would my typical day be like? Or how are you going to evaluate this position? Or is this a new position? Recently, not recently, is it a new position, or did someone leave the job? It's good for you to know whether, if it's a new position, that means they're kind of growing. And if somebody left the job, not that doesn't really tell you anything other than there was somebody there. So the job has already been evaluated. They already have expectations. One of the questions that I like to ask is, what would be the characteristics for someone to succeed in this job? So they're going to tell you, let that be one of the first questions you ask, is what that person is going to look like, so that you can tailor your answers to whatever they highlight, that the traits that the person should have. And then the do the dry run, we've been talking about practice, practice, practice. So any questions on this one? Okay, the reason we started this series was originally to get ready for the Your Future Now statewide career fair. There are 18 community colleges that have band together to present this virtual job fair. I think at this point, there are something like 250 employers that are already listed. At least half of those are within 50 miles of Aurora. Lots and lots of healthcare, if anybody is interested in healthcare. If you notice on this flyer, and we have these hung around the building on our floor, but if you notice on the flyer, the waubonsie.edu/job fairs, that takes you to this page, which is it's on the Waubonsie website, Waubonsee Community College website, and it shows all the different categories of who could be registering. So as students, if you haven't already done this, this is where you're going to register. But you need to create an account first. So you're going to link here to create the account. And then it does help you it walks you through it. It's just complicated. So, and one other thing to notice down here is a list of the employers. So I just looked at it today and there were approximately 250 employers. So that's impressive. That's a lot of jobs. And I looked through the list, shows not only who they are, but what area or career cluster, if you will, what category they are and what kinds of jobs they're hiring for. So any questions on any of what we've talked about so far? Then the last thing, I always end my PowerPoint with our contact information for our advisors. And this stays the same, and it is in our PowerPoint. Remember, Tom and Marlena are your academic transition advisors. I work very closely with them, specifically if you're interested in career, not really taking more classes, you would contact me. But if you're even thinking about training or anything that you're going to school for, you're going to want to contact your advisor. Okay, I'm going to thank you both. I'm trying to get to I can't get to the, all right. Thank you both. Are there any other questions before I stop the recording?
No, thank you.
All right. Nothing? Okay, well, thank you very much for attending most of the series, all of the series. You guys have asked great questions and I've really appreciated your input and support.